Thank you. And just before the Minister leaves, just to say that as a Green Minister, I think what I have to say is particularly pertinent on the subject. But I want to thank the Rural Independent Group, my colleagues, for actually bringing this to the floor so that we have a chance to discuss it again. And I think the buzzwords on a debate like this are climate crisis, climate urgency, but particularly all of that has led to the cost of living and the different actions or lack of action by government leading to a cost of living crisis. You know, there are many solutions that go with those buzzwords, such as, a reduction in emissions or the cost of the fines that we pay for not reducing emissions. Through convergence, for instance, the cost of reduction in farming through convergence, all of which, lead to an enhanced cost of living. And that's where people are suffering, Minister. I think we have to tackle the emergency, but we have to be real. And all the figures we hear are 2030, 2050. What about today and what we can do today? Because that's what people are interested in primarily. And I think if we want to reduce carbon emissions, there are carbon neutral schemes, there are reduction targets that we can use, not just electric cars, but we actually can look to tomorrow to use HVO, a hydro-treated vegetable oil, as a replacement for fossil fuel diesel. Diesel, the figures are astounding when you look at the amount of diesel cars and engines that we have in the country. It makes up 36% of cars. There are over 80,000 tractors. There's upwards of 110,000 HGV and light commercials, all operating on diesel. And that is not to forget diggers, generators and all other types of commercial equipment. That hydrogenated, hydro-treated vegetable oil can be used interchangeable today in a diesel engine without any mechanical change, without any change whatsoever. There's no change even required at the petrol pumps. All we need is a sign that says HVO. The reduction in carbon emissions is 90%. In the particulate emissions, there's a 90% reduction by using HVO. There's upwards of 30% reduction in NOx emissions. And it is astounding to think that for 5 years running, sectoral interests such as the Irish Road Haulage Association have requested a measure from government in the budget that sees hydro-treated vegetable oil, HVO, treated differently as a green fuel over and above diesel. Because currently the position is that excise duties are applied to HVO in the very same amount as they are to diesel. Diesel is the fuel that we hear every day is causing the climate emergency, it's causing our carbon emissions. What we don't hear is that we have an alternative that would save 90%, a tenfold benefit to using it over diesel, and we don't even hear about it. The reason it's not being used is when you apply the same excise to HVO that you do to diesel, it actually makes it 20 cents a litre dearer than diesel. So there's no cost benefit to anybody. There's a massive environmental benefit to the whole island of Ireland and to the people in general, particularly in built-up areas and cities, such as Dublin, where the EPA say the biggest offender is the Dublin port area, and static traffic creating NOx emissions, bad for lung health. But still, all the buzzwords of climate emergency, climate crisis, we still don't see government coming up with the incentive required. The use of HVO, Minister, has the ability for farmers to replace the sugar beet industry. There was an EU directive brought in that says that we can only plant 7% of our hectares for oilseed rape, for the production otherwise of food or for the production of HVO. It doesn't matter, 7%. That would equate to 33,000 hectares of Ireland's landmass. It could be refined here on the island. It would mean that we would actually provide energy security by growing HVO, refining it to the tune of 20%. And we say every day that we don't have energy security. Our gas fields are about to close, but that's still, we'll have them till 2030. We could have this next spring. We could tell the farmers, here's an incentive, it's a rotation crop, it's a carbon efficient crop, it'll do wonders for carbon sequestering. Mind you, the farmers don't get the benefit of that, but that is another benefit that the government would have. You know, currently government uses the farmers' sequestering of carbon and uses it for their benefit. It's time that the government gave back, and it's time that government admitted that we actually have an alternative, but we're not providing the proper incentives so as that it can be utilised. And I think that's a great shame. I think what you're seeing here is government telling us that they can't reduce excise when we know that they can, but they don't have the will to do it. Government should be providing greening schemes that don't penalise and reduce farmers' productions. The growing of 7% of our hectares under oilseed rape on the basis of refining that into HVO, interchangeable for the hundreds of thousands of vehicles that I have just named, at not least the 110,000 trucks and light commercials on our roads. It should be mandatory for anybody entering the city to use HVO, so that we don't get the build-up of NOx emissions. But that can only be done if there's an incentive that makes it cost-effective. And from what I have outlined, I would say that any such scheme would actually be cost-neutral. It certainly is environmentally beneficial. And I do not, and have not heard from government why this isn't been done. So, Minister, in your answer to this motion, maybe you can outline that, because I can see no good reason why we would not try to save 90% of emissions, why we would not reduce NOx emissions by 30%. And in so doing also, let me tell you, it actually reduces the use of AdBlue, which nobody really knows what the effects will be in the future. So this is it's a proposal that can be instigated tomorrow. The farmers only need to be given notice to grow it next spring. And there is no reason, and if there is, I expect you to outline it, but I do believe, Minister, that this is a perfectly good proposal. It's environmentally friendly, and if it can't be done, I would ask that you tell us why. Thank you.